cult's really coming along. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts Thin Coats with me, Phil the Glacial Geek. Today I am going to be working on the Achilles Ridge Runner, doing a vehicle. It's a lot smaller than I had imagined, so I'll put a bottle of paint here in comparison. You can see what the size is in comparison. So it's a lot smaller than I expected, but it's kind of a cool looking model with all the different bits and pieces that they've got going on here. And I also managed to magnetize the whole thing. I've got the bits still that I'm going to be still doing some painting on them, just putting on the silver for them. But I've got it all, the main weapon back here. I didn't magnetize this part because I think it's easy enough that I don't really need to worry too much about people. I don't think they're going to give you too much problem whether you consider that a spotter with, goggles, or if you consider that a smoke grenade launcher. People aren't going to give you too much trouble, I don't think, with that. But I magnetize the weapons because that's an easier visual reference to make there, as opposed to what's the difference between this or a scanner or a person on there. Really, any of them could have been any of the weapons, so I figured I went with that one because it looked kind of cool, I thought. And that's what I did. So that's the model that I'm going to be working with here. And I'm going to be painting it with Army Painter Paints, which is very exciting that they've decided to help sponsor this video by providing me with their whole range of paints, which is very exciting. I'm actually going to be mostly first going to be working on the plate with plate mail metal to do in some of the metal parts on the vehicle, as well as the weapons here, and then probably move on to elemental bolt, which I'm going to use for the cult color. So on the top here, onto the thing here. So, and as for the topic that I'm going to be talking about today, I'm actually going to be talking about the effectiveness of the assassins and what kind of impact I see them having on the game, and whether or not people should be worried about it, or if they need to really consider that every game that they go to now that they're going to have to come with 1,915 points or not. So that's kind of what I'm going to be going over, just kind of discussing the impact that minidex is going to have on it. Again, I'm going to be working with Game Envy, the Game Envy handles here on these, which is really cool. This is one of the best things I've noticed about it, is that I can actually hold this whole vehicle on the handle here. You just take off, make sure you don't have the usual hold handle there, and you've just got it on their new ergonomic handle that they've got coming out that's in Kickstarter right now, I believe. So go check them out and do that. Another thing to keep in mind is that I'm very lax at, but people have reminded me multiple times to let you know. There are a couple other ways that you can support the channel too to keep this kind of programming coming. I have a Patreon. If you can check that out, the link is in the description below. There's a couple different tiers that you can join on there. Any amount that you just want to throw my way is super appreciated. I really appreciate all the Patreons and all the support that they've given me. And just to let you know that that's going on there. I also have a merch store with t-shirts, including a t-shirt that says I spend CP to reroll ones into ones. I've also got one for Woo Crew, a couple other things in there, and a basic one with the Glacial Geek logo on it. So you can go check those out. The link is in the description below as well. All of that helps support the channel and keeps me going, and I really appreciate all the support that you guys have given me in the past and continue to give. So anyway, let's get into the topic that we're going to be discussing today. So assassins. I've always thought they were cool. I like the concept of the assassins, the idea that they've got very specialized skills that they do. You don't just have like the Imperial Assassin. You have a Vindicare Assassin. You have an Eversor Assassin, a Calidus Assassin, a Calexis Assassin. They're all trained and basically raised to do specific tasks and do specific jobs. And I feel like they've done a very good job of representing that with the rules that they have in the army. And one of the things that I think the new mini codex does really well is really emphasize that fact by making them all 85 points. And the reason I think that that's important is that making them all 85 points makes it so that each of them shows that each of them is equally effective. And I've always thought that they were equally effective in certain situations. So, for instance, if you're going up against a psychic army, then suddenly that Calexis Assassin is going to be super effective for you. It's going to be super helpful, being able to take out some of those psychers, get up in there, and really keep them from hurting you as much as they probably will. But, and at the same time, they're not going to be as good at going after characters as, say, a Vindicare Assassin, who can just shoot them from range and has some, the abilities to do that. They're not going to make your opponent really mess up with their game plan like a Calidus Assassin would, causing them to spend extra CP, which I think is an incredibly cool mechanic that they've had in 8th edition with that character, and continue to do so in the new codex. The fact that you can now do it on multiple turns really makes them ongoingly more effective and more of an option that you would want to take. And again, like I said, making them all 85 points like that really shows that they are exactly what they're meant to be, and that you're supposed to choose the right assassin for the right job. And they've made a stratagem now that allows you to do that. So at the beginning of the game, you can bring in an assassin into your list of your choice, and since they're all 85 points, it makes it really easy to save the points in your list. And you can come with, for a 2,000 point game or a tournament or something like that, you can go into it with a 1,915 point list, and suddenly now you have the ability to properly bring the right assassin. So if you show up and your opponent has a whole bunch of psychers, you spend that 1 CP, bring in a Calexis Assassin, and suddenly you have a bit of a counter against it, especially if you're running armies like a Black Templar or something else that just doesn't have any psyker, or if you just didn't bring any psychers. Having that ability to then have some kind of counter psyker to a Thousand Suns list, or an Eldar list with a whole bunch of psychers, really makes it super effective and really helps you to play your gameplay that way. And your game plan is that I'm bringing an assassin to this army. That's what you basically state when you've got your 1,915 point army, is that there's an assassin on this field. And what that stratagem allows you to do is make sure that assassin is the right assassin for the job. So if you need someone that needs to get into the back, into your opponent's rear echelon and wrap them up in combat, so say they've brought a whole bunch of artillery that are right in the back there giving you trouble, you bring an Eversor Assassin to go run up in there and make sure you base contact them, and suddenly they can't shoot. Or you bring a Calidus Assassin and they're able to deep strike in much closer than any of the other ones. And it allows you to have that kind of flexibility. So if you have a Calexis Assassin and your opponent comes up and they've got Necrons, the Calexis can still do some stuff, but it's not going to be really what you would have brought if you were the commander, knowing that you were going into battle with Necrons. And this makes it's very fluffy that you get to choose the proper assassin for the right job as you go into it, and like I said, you have to plan out for it because of the reserves issue, so that you have to spend the points. You have to have those points available to you going into it, so you can't have a 2,000 point list and then spend the CP to bring in an additional assassin. You have to have the 85 points available, and making them all 85 points like that really makes it easier to plan, but it also means that you do plan on bringing an assassin. So like I said, if you need some character control, you bring in your Vindicare Assassin, pop them up in a hide and have them ready to go. Or, say you run it up against knights, at that point, an Eversor Assassin is not going to do you a whole lot of good. Neither really is a Calexis Assassin. But what you can do is you bring in a Calidus Assassin, and now they're spending extra CP for that Raven on their big boy, Castellan there, and then you can bring it in. And they those armies are already short on CP, so any extra ones that you're making them spend can really be effective in limiting what they can do to you. So it's awesome. I really like it a lot. I think it's a super cool way to put them in there because, again, I think you didn't see a lot. You saw some assassins, and there were some people that would swear by assassins for what they had, especially in bringing them into lists that didn't have psychers, so that they had some kind of counter to psychic-heavy lists. But at the same time, there was a lot of times when those lists would run into, like I said, into a Necron list or something else with that Calexis Assassin or whatever else isn't really going to be as effective anymore. And at that point, you really kind of have to wonder, why would you put it in a list if it's not going to be doing much for me in every single battle? Because a lot of these lists, a lot of times when you make the list, you do have contingency plans, but at the same time, the best ones always have units that are going to be effective for them at all times. They got to be able to do something in every battle. And with assassins, especially with assassins, they were very hit or miss depending upon what's going on. So if you're running into a list that just has a bunch of bodies and doesn't have a lot of characters, suddenly that Vindicare assassin isn't going to be as effective for you, because shooting that into a mob of boys, or shooting him into a whole bunch of foot slogging guardsmen without characters around is not going to be helpful to you. It doesn't really do much for you. And to be honest, if you were going in there as an Imperial general, you wouldn't have requested the assistance of a Vindicare assassin in that kind of situation. So having that really makes it really super fluffy and super fun, and honestly a very potent tool. And it means that you're probably going to see a lot more people bringing in assassins because of that. And what it does means that if you're facing off against someone like that, you have to know that that's what's going to happen. So if you have a lot of characters and you go against an Imperial list, if you see that 19-15 points on there, you know that they're bringing an assassin, and they're just going to be able to choose the one that's going to be effective against you. So for me, for instance, I've got a lot of characters in my GSC, so I'm going to have to be ready if I run into that kind of list to be able to expect a Vindicare assassin there trying to pick off my characters and making my day a little bit more difficult, which is fine. That's part and parcel of what the game is, knowing what your opponent's going to do and just be ready for it. I also think that it doesn't make them broken in any way, honestly. When you look at them, they made them far more effective. They made them a little bit more streamlined with the fact that they're all 85 points. I like the fact that they've put into it the whole being able to take with as a Vanguard detachment without an HQ, so you don't have to worry about that, which they started when they made that when they took Imperium away from the ability to, where they took away basically their ability to just be in any kind of Imperium detachment. And they also made it now where you can actually get the benefits for that if you take the entire Assassinorum force. So again, if you were going in there, if you want to go into a list building situation, you want to have all the tools available to you, you can just bring all 4 of them, and suddenly now you get a CP for that detachment that you brought them in. Although I think you're going to see less of that. You'll still see, I'm sure you'll see some of it. There's people that really like to use assassins. There's people that have been using assassins as their primary for their armies a lot, and I think what you're going to see is those people are going to be very happy with everything that they got in this new mini codex. But I think mostly what you're going to see is people bringing one assassin, and it's going to be bringing assassin. So they're just going to have 85 points to spare, spend that 1 CP to bring it, and throw him in there to do what he or she's meant to do best. So if you go up against a bunch of psychers, bring in a Calexis. If you're going up against a knight army that's really super CP heavy early on, bring in a Calidus, and then spend you can have that CP the CP drain go on for other additions, other turns now with their stratagems. If you've got if you're going up against an army and you look there and they've got a ton of characters that are all buffing everyone and making it difficult for your army to handle, bring in a Vindicare assassin. They're a lot more reliable now with their rules. I think they're a lot more reliable with their stratagems that they've got going on there, like headshot. And I think what you're going to have is a situation where they become a lot more. They've become a better option for an Imperial force to take, since you don't have to have prior knowledge of what your opponent's going to bring. You don't have to hope for it. They're not there as a contingency plan. I think what they are is they're an effective tool now that you go, okay, so what are these guys going to do? And then you basically bring Imperial Assassin, who will then have a specific role that you determine at the beginning of the game when you bring them. So like I said, you have all the assassins available to you, and then you show up, look at the army, and go, okay, well, the part of his army that I'm not going to be able to handle as well is going to be best suited, or is going to be best handled by this assassin. And then you spend the CP, have that assassin do their job, and then you go on from there. And then the next round you choose something else. So, like I said, I think it's super cool. I think it's super fluffy, and I think it's super fun. None of it seems, like I said, super broken. There's some really cool things that they can do, but you're spending CP for it, which is usually at a it can be at a premium, especially if you're running, if someone's bringing guard and they're getting a lot of CP from that. If they're running with knights, those knights eat up CP like it's their job. If you're running it with if anything that you've really got there, CP are either hard to come by or are being spent on other things that they've become super CP heavy, hungry for, and as such, the stratagems that you've got with these assassins are cool, but they're going to be very situational, and I don't think that they're going to be game-breakingly situational, where people are going to really just mess with everything because of it. I think that you're going to see them. I think they're going to be effective. I don't think that they're going to be throwaways anymore. I think for a while there in 8th edition, especially in 7th edition, and then for a while in 8th edition, they were good, but they weren't crazy good. And a lot of it came down to the fact that you had to take them, you had to figure it out beforehand. So like I said, if you're going up against a whole bunch of orcs, Eversor Assassin is not super great. He's really good. He's got a lot of attacks, but he doesn't have 30 boys worth of attacks that are just going to chew him up the second he gets into combat, which is what he wants to do. But if you go up against a Space Marine army, I bet you that Eversor Assassin is going to do very well. Getting in there, he's got the AP, he's got the attacks to handle a min squad unit of Marines, or Primaris or regular Marines, however your opponent is running them. They're going to be effective against that, and I think that it's kind of cool that you can now bring him when he's going to be effective, so he doesn't just sit there and make you rue the day that you bought that model. So. That's kind of what I think about them. Another thing that I've seen come up that I think is probably going to be addressed with the FAQ is people taking them in chaos detachments, because it requires you to take Cypher, and it requires you to use him keep him as your warlord. The fact is, it costs too much as a chaos player to try to bring these assassins. Like I said, they're good, but they're not broken good that it's worth losing a warlord trait, or it's worth having to take, the 80 points for Cypher as a tax in order to do it. And like I said, there are always going to be situations where there are certain armies that the assassins are not incredible against, and that the assassins don't have like a really specific role against. And in those situations, you've paid the tax to bring them as a with the Chaos Army, so you've left yourself 85 points shy of your 2,000 goal. You've also had to take a character that you would normally not be taking especially in a competitive situation, and it forces your hand on what kind of detachments you can run and what kind of situations that you can run them in, and at the hope that it becomes effective. So you're hoping that you can, that it'll be able to bring in that Calexis and handle the Psychers. Where I think Chaos is better suited to just, they have options for 85 points or for 165 points if you want to include the tax that you're bringing in with Cypher, that you can actually, that are going to be better able to handle those kind of situations that you're afraid of. So I think Chaos is better served ignoring these guys, and I think they're going to be taken away in the FAQ anyway. That's going to be coming out soon. And the bare facts of it are that you're just going to be left with a situation where you're not going to be as effective. You have to do a lot to make it happen in the first place, and it's a tool for the Imperium that I think is what it's going to come down to. And I think that's just. I've heard people talk about it, and I've heard about what they would want to use them for, and I think it's more just the cool factor of getting one over on GW because they forgot about this one loophole, and I'm going to show them with these lists, and they're not as effective. They're not super good. The assassins don't fill roles that are not filled by other aspects of chaos armies. And because of that, I don't see them being as useful to build a list around, because you really have to build a list around bringing assassins if you want to do that as a chaos player. Versus an imperial player, you just have to leave yourself 85 points under your aim goal there, and suddenly you have the ability to do it. And it becomes, in that case, because you don't have to do anything else, it becomes a fair idea to do. But like I said, if you have to design an entire list around it, they become less desirable. And that's the situation that you had before the new mini codex came out with that stratum, is that people would have to design their lists around having these assassins, and most times people just didn't do it. You saw people bring Calexis assassins a bunch to handle psychers. You saw people bringing some Vindicares and some Calidus. You saw more Calidus when the CP cost went up on the knights, but even then, you still didn't see him bringing it, because, like I said, you had to design a list around bringing them and bringing specific ones, and it just becomes way more easy for an Imperial player to just leave 85 points off the table, so that you could just bring in whatever works best. And sometimes you're gonna have situations where it's not gonna work really at all. There are some armies and some builds and some lists that really assassins have no answer for. And if that's the case, then you deal with that with that list, but you don't design your whole list overtaking it. And leaving 85 points off the table, or having 85 points that aren't quite as effective as you'd want them to be, is a shy bit better than having 165 points if you want to bring Cypher and leave 85 points off the table to go into those situations. It just becomes too much of a risk. It becomes too much of a hassle, that for the kind of impact that you're going to see them do, it doesn't seem worth it to me. You might disagree, and you're free to try to pull that loophole until it gets filled by GW, because I guarantee you that's not what they intended to do. And I think that if that's the case, then you're going to be making lists and gameplays with something that's going to be taken away, and you're going to have to start from scratch again. Which maybe that's your thing. Maybe you just like making these lists, finding these loopholes, and then having to start over again the second GW closes them up, which is fine if that's if that's what you want to do. But just I wouldn't start planning a year in advance being able to take it in your list because of that. So yeah, like I said, I think that there are certain ones. I think they've they've helped even the playing field with a lot of them. I think that with a lot of the stratagems that they have, they've made them more worth taking. Like I said, the Calidus Assassin was fun, being able to have that the extra CP that your opponent would have to do first turn, and because of that, it became a pretty fun thing to take. But because it was only one turn's worth, it became less of a sure thing and less of an impact on the game. So there was no reason to really. It became less effective to take it. And when you're dealing with competitive lists, people are looking for the most effective things to take. So if you saw them a lot in fun games, you saw them a lot in the game store games, but you didn't really see a whole lot of them in competitive play because of the fact. I know there's some people that did bring them, and honestly, there were probably times when those really helped, especially when your opponent tried to spend 3 CP to spend on their Castellan to get the rerolls for Raven, and suddenly they're spending 4 CP, and then they try to rotate ion shields, and they're playing another gajillion CP. They become super effective at that point, but there are certain armies that can just wait till turn 2 before they're going to start doing it. Now, with the stratagem that allows them to continue that effect into turn 2, turn 3, they become a lot more effective at what they do, because they're good at the Calidus Assassin's pretty decent at close combat, having that special deep strike that allows them to get closer because of the polymorphine skin is pretty effective against a lot of models, because they'll be screening out for deep strike, but it's hard to screen out for deep strike that close. So they're pretty good at getting in and putting the bad touch onto whatever models that they want to. So it becomes hard to screen out your artillery from a unit that can deep strike within 3 inches of you. And charge, which is the difference between the Gene Stealer Cult codex, the Gene Stealer Cult stratagem that allows them to deep strike within 3 inches. They can't charge, so they can't put that kind of a effect onto you. And it's outside of 3 inches, so they can't heroically intervene either, which is of worth to note. So yeah, but now that they have the ability to stretch that out into other turns, it becomes they can have their effect and have their impact on the playing field like they ought to have for longer, and that makes them much more of a viable option to take. Simply because of that, the fact that they're now going to be doing their special deal, their special effect for the entire game, possibly makes them something that you just they're not just a one shot deal. They're not just something that you kind of use and then ignore for the rest of the game, or use and then it dies and you don't care. Now they're going to be able to do what they're designed to do, what makes them special, what makes them, because Eversur Assassins are also really good in combat, and they've got the 3d6 charge, so they're probably going to be making charges early, just like a Calidus Assassin. They're good in close combat, and they've got the ability to take different shots, just like the Calidus Assassin. But those two are better at doing that than the Calidus Assassin, straight up, in my opinion. But what the Calidus Assassin has that those don't is the ability to mess with your opponent's CP, and that is worth its weight in gold, honestly, especially in this game. The way that CP have become a huge part of the game, a huge part of people's strategies. People go into games knowing exactly what they're going to be spending their CP on. You know what I mean? They go, I'm not going to be re-rolling any rolls. The only thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be spending it on rotate iron shields this turn. I'm going to be spending the CP on weapons of the Dark Age, whatever it is that they decide that they're going to do. I had that when I was running with my Dark Angels. I would go into it with a game plan for my CP, being like, all right, well, I can get 2 turns of Speed of the Raven. I've got 3 turns of weapons of the Dark Age. I've got the ability to do those different things. I had plans for my CP because they were limited. And because they were limited, it meant I had to go into it with a game plan. And now, if you've got this Calidus Assassin that's suddenly making me pay 2 CP for Weapons of the Dark Age, that's 1 less turn of Weapons of the Dark Age being able to be used than I had planned out for. And suddenly my game plan is seriously messed with. And because of that, it changes the way I would have to approach situations. It would make me think about what kind of CP I want to spend, and if I was going up against someone who had a Calidus Assassin, I might be like, all right, well, originally I might just be like, all right, well, I'll just wait till turn 2 to really start implementing my game plan using these CP the way that I wanted to. And now, because of that, I can't even do that. I'd have to go in and go, all right, well, I've just got to do what I got to do because they can spend their CP to mess with mine. And I think that kind of dramatic effect is super good. It's super effective because anytime you can get into your opponent's head, anytime you can change their game plan is, you're at an advantage. And getting those advantages is what's going to push you over into being able to win games consistently. To win games consistently, I think that's what it's going to do. So yeah, it's like I said, I don't think that they're game breaking. I don't think that they're going to change a whole lot of meta, other than the fact that I think you're going to see a lot more Imperial lists that are going to be using 1915 points just for that kind of versatility. Because, like I said, it's I don't think a single assassin is going to break a situation, but I think that a single assassin makes sense if you have the opportunity to take it for just leaving 85 points off the table until you see what your opponent has. So, but let me know what you guys think for serious. I really want to know, because I've talked to a lot of different people about this, and I've talked to various other in various other situations, and I've seen a little bit of it in action, and it's kind of interesting. Like I ran into a list that had 85 points down. during a tournament with my Gene Stealer cult, and when he saw that I had 1,000 characters all buffing up my stuff, he was like, all right, I'm going to take the Vindicare, and the Vindicare started shooting, and you can buff up that Vindicare to do some really, pretty handy stuff, and I've got the ability to throw some neophytes in the way, but at the same time, it's not a guarantee. It's a 4-up that I've got to do that, and suddenly if he gets that 6 to wound, you get headshot, he's shooting 2 of my characters, doing D6 wounds. It can be gross. It can be really gross. And super effective, like I said. But at the same time, I'm sure if I ran in there I had a couple of characters or a couple of things in the background, in the back row that were ready to handle the situation, he could just use the same kind of stuff with an Eversur assassin, or if I had knights, he goes Calidus assassin, and you throw it in there, and I think it's cool. I think it is really cool. I think it's a fun thing. I think it's an interesting thing. I think it's a good way for GW to have people using assassins more. Like I said, you don't have to have a whole game plan based around assassins. You don't have to try to think ahead to include it, because like I said, I've had lists that I've run with Calexis assassins, and I ran into an opponent that didn't have any psychers, and it's like, all right, well, he could be, pretty intrusive in the back line over there where he pops up and you can only hit him on 6s, but at the same time, his real bread and butter, the thing that really makes him worth it, is the ability to cancel out, psychers' ability to do what they do. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. A cool thing, not game breaking. You'll probably see a fair amount of it just because it's kind of cool, especially if you're an Imperial player. The ability to do it. I don't think that Chaos really, I don't think it's worth it. I just don't see it being worth it. I think there's so much more that you can spend 165 points for Chaos that would just be more effective. If you've got 1,000 Suns, more Zangors for that. 165 is what, like an additional 20 Zangors? That's brutal. I'd rather have 20 Zangors than Cypher and 1 assassin. I think that, if you're running any other kind of Chaos army, I'd rather have more bodies if I'm running demons, or if I'm running, Chaos Space Marines, I'd rather have that 165 points going into something that's going to be a bit more predictable in its uses. So that's just kind of my idea. That's my thoughts on it. I think that I think the Chaos thing is going to be a non-issue soon enough anyway, as soon as I think it's going to get FAQ'd out. Just because it's clearly not what they intended, and GW has basically had it here where they just don't like to keep things that they don't intend going along for a long time. They they see it happening, and once it starts to gain enough speed that people are starting to talk about it, they'll hear about it and they'll make a change. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. But let me know what you guys think, and which of the assassins do you think is the best. Like I said, I think the fact that you can just take Imperial Assassin now is the best part of this whole thing. So I don't have to know ahead of time what I want to bring. I don't have to hope that my opponents bring in a Psychic army. I don't have to hope that my opponents bring in a bunch of characters for my Vindicare to snipe out. I can just know, once I see my opponent's list, what is going to be most effective. And I can see it, look at it, and go, all right, well, they don't have a whole lot of characters, but my army's going to have a hard time getting to those characters, because he's got a whole bunch of bodies in the front here that the rest of my army is going to be busy with. So let me take that Vindicare anyway to do that job, which is exactly what assassins are supposed to do in the fluff anyway, is they're supposed to be out there doing the specific job that they're there for. So if they're going to be hunting Psychers, they send in a Calexis. If they were meant to go mess with their opponent's war plans, to get in there, infiltrate their hierarchy and things like that, you're going to send in a Calidus assassin. If you need someone to snipe out important people, then you got a Vindicare. If you need someone to go just beat some faces or tear them off of their skulls, then that's when you send in an Eversur. And that's, to me, the best part of that whole situation. That one stratagem to allow you to just leave 85 points off the table and just go, I'm going to bring an assassin, and then being able to choose what it's for is super fluffy, and it's super effective for what the assassins are meant to do. And that's what you're supposed to be able to do with assassins, and they did it. They found a way to make it, to bring it to life, And at the end of the day, that's really what their aim is for a lot of these things. They've got a more of an eye towards the competitive scenes and the competitive situations now than they have in the past. And because of that, I think that you see a much more balanced game. You see a lot more diverse armies at tournaments. You see a lot more diverse finishings in the top 10 than we ever saw in 7th edition. But at the same time, when they make rules, when they make codexes, when they make these armies, their first thought isn't, how's this going to affect LVO? Their first thought is, what's a cool thing that we can do with this? How can we make this book come to life? How can we make this part of the lore really shine through for our players to play with? And that's what they've done with this, and they've made it different CP if you're playing match play or if you're playing open play, because if you're playing open play, it's 3 CP to do because you don't have to worry about the reserve points. But if you are playing in match play, you have to leave that 85 points off your list, and they know it. That's what you've got there, and the situation, what you can have there is you've got, it's up in the air. Like I said, if you run into an army that none of the assassins really have an ideal target or an ideal role, you still have those 85 points that you've spent. You've said that an assassin's being sent in, and just have to figure out what that assassin's going to do. So I think it's cool. I think it's awesome, and I think it's super rich. Like, I never would have thought of it. Honestly, I know that they've had the summoning where, I like the idea of summoning where it's like, all right, these are the demons that I need, and they're the ones that I'm calling forth from the warp to do this specific task. And I think that's cool, keeping those reserve points off onto the side. But I never even crossed my mind to use that same kind of mechanic on assassins. But it makes so much sense. When you read some of the books, like when you read what was it I was reading? It was reading the Beast Arises series. They have a bunch of assassins in that situation doing different things. And again, what it came down to is that they used the different assassins doing the different jobs for different purposes, and they all did what they were supposed to do at different times. And that's what would happen, You wouldn't just be going out to battle and be like, all right, well, I'm going to have a Vindicare assassin tag along with me in case I've got some of these. No, what you would do is you'd be like, all right, I'm facing this army. I know that they're being led by a whole coterie of crazy characters that just need to be taken out to try to really, demoralize the army. You go, okay, well, here's a Vindicare assassin, he'll help you out. Or you go, it's like, well, we're going up against these Eldar, and they're being led by a cabal of psychers that are just, running rampant over here. It's like, all right, well, we'll go hunt them down with this Calexis assassin. So that's kind of the way I see it. I think it's super fluffy. I think it's a super creative use of the summoning reserve point mechanic, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think it's going to be super cool to see how how Imperial players utilize it and see what kind of effect it's going to have. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be a broken effect. I think it's going to be a fun effect. I think it's going to. I think you're going to see a fair amount of it, especially early on now, because of people wanting to see how it works. But you're not. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be game changing. You might see it in a lot of Imperial lists because of the fact that it's a cool thing to have. It's basically 85 points of Swiss Army knife, so that you've got the tool that you need to do what you need to do with it. But I don't think, like I said, I don't think it's going to break the game. I don't think that you're going to have a whole lot of problems. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. What are your plans? Are you planning on bringing 1,915 points to your 2,000 point game to utilize your assassins? Do you have the assassins? Which one's your favorite? Which one has done the best for you, and which one has done the least work for you? I've had plenty of times when I've rolled ones to hit or ones to wound with my Vindicare assassin to make me frustrated with him, which is why I don't really bring him alone in a list unless. But now I could bring 85 points less and be like, all right, well, now he can be effective, and then roll my ones. and like my T-shirt says, I can spend my CP to reroll ones into ones. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil the Glacial Geek as always, and until next time, have fun.